The glass shattered against the wall, spraying shards across the hardwood floor. "Jason, you're pathetic," my wife screamed, her voice echoing through the kitchen like a final verdict. I stood there frozen, the taste of iron in my mouth from biting back the words I wanted to say. Our son Daniel peeked from the staircase, his wide eyes darting between us. My wife didn't notice him, or maybe she didn't care. "You think this house, this life, still belongs to you?" she spat, pointing at me with trembling hands painted in expensive jewelry I'd paid for. "You've been replaced. You just don't realize it yet." My pulse hammered in my temples. Replaced. That word dug into me like a blade. I glanced at the family photo hanging crooked on the wall. Me, her, and Daniel smiling at last year's Christmas. I remembered how I'd worked double shifts to afford those gifts stacked under the tree. But all that stood in front of me now was a stranger wearing my wife's face. Through the open window, the scent of cut grass floated in with the summer air. Normally it calmed me, but now it only mocked the chaos inside. The suburban quiet outside clashed with the storm raging in my own home. She leaned closer, her perfume sharp and suffocating. "Dan treats me better than you ever did. He listens. He knows what I need. Something you never figured out in all these years. Dan, my brother." The floor tilted under me. My hands curled into fists, but I forced them open, digging my nails into my palms until they burned. Daniel, still on the staircase, let out a soft gasp. He had heard everything. My wife finally noticed him and hissed, "Go back to your room. This is none of your business." But it was his business. It was our family's business. Our destruction playing out in real time. I locked eyes with my son, silently promising him something I couldn't yet put into words. This wasn't the end. I turned back to her, my voice low and steady despite the storm inside me. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." She laughed, a hollow, cruel sound that bounced off the walls of the home I'd built. "The only mistake was ever thinking you were enough." The clock on the wall ticked once, loud in the silence that followed. My world had just collapsed, but something new stirred beneath the wreckage. She thought she could break me. She thought she could erase me, but I wasn't going anywhere. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. The house was silent, but it wasn't peace. It was the heavy silence that comes after a storm, when broken branches still litter the ground. I sat alone in the living room, the shadows of the furniture stretching long across the floor, lit only by the faint glow of a street lamp seeping through the curtains. I stared at the photo on the mantel, me, Sarah, and Daniel. My smile looked real, but now I couldn't remember the man in that picture. Had I been blind, or had she been acting all along? The grandfather clock in the corner ticked mercilessly, each sound dragging me deeper into memories I didn't want to face. I remembered when Sarah and I first bought this house. The walls were bare, the rooms echoing with possibility. I spent weekends sanding the floors, painting Daniel's room a soft blue before he was even born. Every nail, every brushstroke carried the weight of my promise. "I will build this family with my own hands." I thought I had kept that promise. Sarah used to bring me lemonade while I worked outside under the summer sun. Her laugh had been light, real, or at least it felt that way. But now, every memory soured, every smile replayed in my mind like a carefully staged performance. And Dan, my own brother. The betrayal twisted my stomach until I felt sick. I had covered for him more times than I could count, helped him pay rent, fixed his car when he blew his engine, even bailed him out when he got into trouble with debt collectors. All those nights he sat at our dinner table eating the food I bought, laughing with my wife. I thought he was grateful. Turns out, he was laying the groundwork to steal everything from me. My chest tightened as I thought of Daniel. He deserved better than this. He was only 12, old enough to understand the pain, too young to carry it. That night on the staircase, I'd seen confusion and fear in his eyes. He didn't just lose trust in his mother, he was losing his foundation. The certainty that his family was unshakable. I wanted to protect him, but how? The court would favor Sarah. She had money, my money. She had influence. And now she had Dan. Together, they would try to strip me of everything: my home, my son, my dignity. I rubbed my temples, the smell of whiskey lingering from the untouched glass on the table. I'd poured it earlier, but drinking felt like surrender. I needed my mind sharp. On the table lay a small wooden box, scuffed from years of use. Inside were my father's cufflinks, the only thing I had left of him. He used to say, "Jason, strength isn't in how hard you hit back, it's in how long you can stand while the world swings at you." I touched the cufflinks and whispered to myself, "I'm still standing, Dad." But standing wasn't enough anymore. Sarah and Dan had crossed a line. They thought I'd roll over, accept my fate, and disappear quietly. That was their mistake. Outside, the first signs of dawn crept across the horizon, the pale light bleeding into the room. For a moment, I let myself breathe it in. The smell of dew, the faint sound of birds breaking the night's silence. It reminded me of the mornings when Daniel was little, running into my arms before school, his laughter filling the house with a joy that made every sacrifice worth it. That memory fueled me. I wasn't going to let Sarah take him from me. I wasn't going to let Dan walk away with my life's work. The burden pressed heavy on my chest, but beneath it, something else was forming. Something sharp, calculated, unshakable. I would play their game, but unlike them, I knew how to build things from nothing. I knew how to wait, how to plan, how to make every move count. They thought they had already won, but this story wasn't over. Not even close. 2 days later it happened. The moment that snapped the last thread holding me together. I came home from work earlier than usual. The air outside was heavy with summer heat, the kind that makes the asphalt shimmer and cicadas buzz in the distance. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car parked crookedly at the curb. Dan's car. My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to breathe. Maybe he was just visiting. Maybe it wasn't what I thought. But when I stepped inside, the house smelled of perfume and wine. Not just any perfume. Sarah's favorite. The one I'd bought her last Christmas. It lingered in the air, mixed with laughter echoing faintly from upstairs. My grip on the doorknob tightened until my knuckles turned white. Daniel wasn't home. He was at a friend's house. Thank God. I walked quietly through the living room, the soft carpet muffling my footsteps. A trail of clothes led from the staircase. His shirt, her blouse, like breadcrumbs spelling out my humiliation. Each step I took up the stairs felt heavier, the air thicker, until I reached our bedroom door. It was open just a crack. I pushed it, and the sound hit me before the sight did. Their voices tangled, a grotesque duet of betrayal. Then I saw them, my wife, my brother, in the bed I had built with my own hands, on the sheets I had bought after months of saving. My vision tunneled. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My chest felt crushed under a weight so massive I thought my ribs might break. Sarah's eyes locked onto mine first. She froze, her face draining of color. Dan turned slowly, his smirk collapsing when he saw me standing there. Jason, she started, her voice trembling. But I didn't let her finish. My voice cut through the air, sharper than a blade. You've made your choice. I didn't shout. I didn't throw anything. I didn't raise a hand. My calm terrified them more than any rage ever could. I turned and walked out, each step steady, deliberate, fine. Downstairs the house looked different, alien. Every photo frame, every piece of furniture, every wall suddenly felt like a stranger's possession. I had poured my life into this place, and in one cruel instant, it had been defiled beyond repair. Outside, the sky was turning dark, thunderheads rolling in. A storm was coming, the wind carrying the smell of rain and electricity. I stood on the porch, the air heavy against my skin, and realized something crystal clear. There was no going back. Sarah had burned the bridge. Dan had salted the earth. The Jason they thought they knew, the quiet provider, the forgiving brother, the man who kept swallowing pain for the sake of peace, was gone. I stepped into the storm as the first drops fell, cool against my burning skin. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to clarity. This wasn't just betrayal, this was war. The storm raged through the night, but inside me the storm was worse. I sat in my truck, parked at the edge of town by the old train tracks, the rain hammering against the windshield in violent bursts. The wipers squeaked back and forth, struggling to keep up, like they were fighting a losing battle. Just like me, my hands gripped the steering wheel until my fingers ached. Part of me wanted to turn around, storm back into that house, and rip everything apart, to shout, to demand answers, to unleash every ounce of pain boiling inside me. But another part of me whispered, and then what, Jason? I closed my eyes, the smell of damp leather and gasoline filling the cab. My father's words echoed again. Strength isn't in how hard you hit back. But I wasn't sure I had any strength left. I felt hollow, gutted, like someone had carved out the core of who I was. Images of Daniel flashed in my mind. His smile, his laugh, the way he used to run into my arms after school, backpack bouncing on his shoulders. Would he still look at me the same if I lost control, if I became the monster Sarah already painted me to be? I pressed my forehead against the steering wheel, the metal cold against my skin. My chest burned with questions I couldn't silence. What if she's right? What if I wasn't enough? What if I've been fooling myself all these years, thinking I could hold a family together with hard work and loyalty. The rain blurred the world outside, streetlights smearing into streaks of yellow and orange. It felt like the whole world was dissolving, and I was dissolving with. For a moment, I thought about driving away, leaving it all behind. The house, the betrayal, even Daniel, just disappearing into another state, another life, maybe start over where nobody knew my name. But the thought died as quickly as it came. Running wasn't in my blood. It never had been. I'd spent my whole life building things, not abandoning them. I sat back, exhaling slowly, the fog of my breath clouding the window. My reflection stared back at me. Tired eyes, unshaven jaw. A man I barely recognized. That's when it hit me. Sarah and Dan had already taken so much from me. My trust, my peace, my marriage. If I let them take Daniel too, if I walked away now, then they truly won. The storm outside began to calm, the rain softening to a steady drizzle. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine rumbling back to life. The headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the wet pavement ahead. No, I wouldn't run. I would stay. I would fight, but not with fists, not with rage, with something colder, sharper, with patience. They thought I was broken. They thought I'd collapse under the weight of betrayal. They were wrong. Before I tell you what I did next, let me ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by the very people you trusted the most? The kind of betrayal that doesn't just hurt, it reshapes you. Because that's where I was, alone in my truck, staring at a road that seemed endless. I realized I had two choices: give up, or fight back in a way they'd never see coming. And I need to know, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Walk away and start fresh, or stay and make sure those who betrayed you learned exactly what it feels like to lose everything? Tell me in the comments. Now, let me show you how I chose my path. The next morning, the world looked ordinary. Blue skies, kids riding bikes, sprinklers hissing across manicured lawns. But inside me, nothing was ordinary anymore. My wife and my brother thought they could shatter me, sweep up the pieces, and carry on as if I'd never existed. They were wrong. I drove past the house slowly, just to see. The curtains were drawn, but Dan's car was still there. My jaw tight. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. My home had become their playground, my absence their convenience. At work I barely heard my colleagues. Papers slid across my desk, voices droned in the background. But my mind was elsewhere. Every detail of my life with Sarah replayed in sharp fragments. The wedding vows, her tears when Daniel was born, the nights she said she couldn't imagine life without me. Lies, all of it. But then came the memory of Daniel, his small hand gripping mine, his voice asking why Mom and Uncle Dan laughed more with each other than with me. He'd asked that weeks ago, before I knew the truth. My silence then had been cowardice. Never again. That night I started laying the groundwork. First, the finances. Sarah never paid attention to the details. She preferred the spending, not the earning. But me, I knew every account, every mortgage payment, every credit card in both our names. I opened the filing cabinet, pulled out the folders, and spread them across the kitchen table like puzzle pieces. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence as I worked, pen scratching across paper. Second, the house deed. My name was still the only one on. That detail alone sparked something cold and fierce in my chest. She might live there. She might defile it with my brother. But legally, it was still mine. Third, Daniel. My son was the only thing that mattered more than revenge. I began documenting everything. Dates, times, even the clothes Dan's car left scattered outside my house. If it came to custody, I'd be ready. As the hours passed, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't rage anymore. It was strategy. For years, Sarah had seen me as the dependable man, who fixed broken pipes, paid overdue bills, and stayed late at work to keep the family afloat. She never imagined that same discipline could be turned against her. The house creaked softly, the wooden beams settling in the night. I looked around at the walls I had painted, the furniture I had built, the memories embedded in every corner, and then I whispered to the empty room, "You won't take this from me." The next morning, I tested my theory. I canceled one automatic payment, Sarah's luxury credit card she used for shopping sprees. By noon my phone buzzed with her angry texts. "Jason, the bank says the payment didn't go through. Did you mess something up?" I didn't answer. Instead I poured myself a cup of coffee and watched the steam rise, feeling a satisfaction I hadn't tasted in weeks. This was only the beginning. That evening, Daniel called me from his friend's house. His voice was small, uncertain. "Dad, are you okay?" I swallowed hard, forcing steadiness into my reply. "I'm fine, buddy. Better than fine. You just focus on school, alright? He hesitated. Mom says you're unstable. The word hit me like a slap. Unstable. That was their plan. Paint me as broken, weak, unfit to be a father. I clenched my jaw and said softly, "Don't worry about what Mom says. Just remember this. I'll always fight for you. Always." When I hung up, the fire inside me blazed hotter. They thought they could strip me of my dignity, my son, my life. But they had underestimated the man who built everything they were trying to steal. And now, brick by brick, I was going to take it back. The next week was a blur of calculated moves. Every evening, after work, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, my laptop, and the weight of betrayal heavy on my shoulders. But instead of crumbling, I channeled it. Every detail became a weapon. Every memory became fuel. Sarah and Dan were careless. Maybe they thought I'd given up, or maybe they were too intoxicated with their stolen happiness to notice the cracks forming beneath them. Either way, I paid attention. I began with the bills. Sarah had grown accustomed to a life of indulgence. The luxury car, the boutique shopping, the spa memberships, all of it ran through accounts I controlled. Quietly, I began redirecting funds, canceling auto payments, closing out cards she assumed would always be there. The first sign of her panic came in a voicemail, her voice shrill with frustration. "Jason, I don't know what game you're playing, but the car payment bounced. Do you want us to lose everything? Fix." I replayed that voicemail 3 times, not because I needed to hear the words, but because the sound of her unraveling gave me strength. Then came Dan. He had no idea how exposed he was. His debts had followed him like shadows: gambling, loans, reckless spending. I started making phone calls, quiet inquiries to people who didn't advertise their services in the yellow pages, the kind of men who never forgot who owed them money. It didn't take long. Word spread, and suddenly Dan was getting visits at odd hours. Men in dark cars parked a little too long outside the house. His swagger began to fade, replaced by a nervous edge I'd never seen before. But I wasn't reckless. Every move I made was cloaked in patience. My father's cufflinks stayed on my desk as a reminder: strength isn't in how hard you hit, it's in how long you can stand. Still, there were nights when doubt crept in. I'd sit alone, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was losing myself in this web of revenge. Then Daniel's face would flash in my mind, and the doubt turned back into resolve. I wasn't just fighting for me, I was fighting for him, for the truth, for justice. One evening, I parked down the street from my house, watching through the windshield as shadows moved across the curb. I could hear faint laughter through the open windows, Sarah's laugh, high and sharp, mixed with Dan's lower tone. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, but I stayed put. Not yet. I noticed the mailbox flag raised. When the street was clear, I walked casually past, slipping the envelope into my jacket. Back in my truck, under the glow of the dome light, I opened it. Credit card overdue. Past due notice. Late fees piling up. Perfect. I placed it carefully back in the envelope. Every piece of paper was evidence. Every overdue bill another nail in the coffin they were building for themselves. The turning point came when Daniel stayed with me for the weekend. We were eating pizza, the greasy cardboard box between us, when he looked up and asked, "Dad, do you hate Mom now?" The question broke me for a moment. His eyes were so open, so desperate for reassurance. I reached across the table, placing my hand over his. "No, son, I don't hate, but I won't let her hurt us anymore." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than his age allowed. That was when I knew my revenge wasn't just about settling score. It was about protecting Daniel, about showing him that betrayal has consequences, that truth always finds its way to the surface. By the end of that week, Sarah had 3 overdue notices. Dan was dodging phone calls, and I had every record, every receipt, neatly filed in a folder labeled with one word: justice. They thought they had built a new life on the ruins of mine, but I was quietly tearing it apart, brick by brick, from underneath their feet, and soon they would feel the collapse. It was a Wednesday evening when I crossed the line, the kind of line you don't come back from. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving a violet haze over the neighborhood. I parked my truck 2 blocks away from the house that used to be mine, my house, my home. Now, it was just the stage for their betrayal. I walked slowly, the air thick with the smell of freshly cut grass, sprinklers ticking in the distance. My pulse drummed in my ears. As I approached the driveway, Dan's car sat there, crooked as always, arrogance etched even in the way he parked. Through the living room window, I saw Sarah, curled on the couch, glass of wine in hand, laughing at something on the TV. Dan sat beside her, his arm draped casually across the backrest. The sight made my stomach twist, but my face remained calm. I slipped a small envelope into the mailbox and lowered the flap. Inside was a copy of one of Dan's overdue notices, this time with a note in my handwriting. Does Sarah know? It wasn't just about exposing him. It was about planting the first seed of doubt between them. As I walked back toward my truck, my phone, a text from an unknown number. Your brother owes us. Time's up. My chest tightened. I had stirred the hornet's nest. Dan's debts were no longer whispers. They were knocking on the door, and I had pointed them right toward him. That was the moment I realized there was no going back. I sat in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel, the faint scent of rain still clinging to the air from the afternoon shower. My reflection in the rearview mirror didn't look like me anymore. My eyes were sharper, colder, the eyes of a man who had nothing left to lose. For years, I had been the peacemaker, the provider, the man who absorbed every hit life threw at him without complaint. But now, I was something else entirely. They had pushed me too far. The phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from Sarah. Her voice trembled with anger. Jason, what the hell is going on? Dan's being harassed. The bills aren't paid and Daniel keeps asking questions. If this is your way of getting back at me, it won't work. You're only proving you're unfit. Do you hear me? Unfit. I ended the call before she finished. My thumb hovered over the screen, but instead of responding, I slipped the phone into my pocket. Let her rant. Let her cling to the illusion of control, because I knew the truth. She wasn't in control anymore. I was. The line had been cracked. The quiet Jason she remembered was gone, and in his place stood someone who wasn't afraid to watch everything she built crumble into dust. And when it did, I would be there watching. For the first time in weeks, Sarah called me, sounding calm, almost gentle. Jason, can we talk? Her voice carried that softness she used to use when she wanted something expensive. I almost laughed. We met at a cafe downtown, one of her choosing, a place with marble tables and overpriced coffee that smelled faintly of cinnamon and burnt sugar. She was already seated when I walked in, wearing her best mask, polished hair, flawless makeup, a smile practiced in the mirror. Thank you for coming, she said as I sat down. I think, maybe we've both made mistakes. Maybe we can work something out. Her eyes flickered with something like hope, but I knew better. This wasn't reconciliation. It was negotiation. Work something out, I repeated, leaning back. The chair creaked beneath me, the sound sharp against the cafe's soft jazz. She reached across the table, her hand grazing mine. The touch felt foreign, like ice. Daniel needs stability. We need to stop fighting. Maybe we could arrange custody without dragging this into court. Maybe we can find peace. For a second I let myself imagine it. The three of us laughing again. The weight of betrayal lifted. Daniel growing up without this war looming over him. For a second I wanted to believe her, but then I saw it. The tiny twitch in her jaw. The way her fingers clutched her designer purse a little too tightly. This wasn't about peace. This was about buying time. Dan was in trouble. His debts circling like vultures. Their bills were piling up. She needed me to step in, to rescue her the way I always had. I sipped my coffee slowly, the bitterness coating my tongue. So what exactly are you asking, Sarah? Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes betrayed her. Just help us get through this rough patch. Cover the mortgage, the car, a few things for Daniel. Once we're stable again, everything will feel different. Us, she said us. I set the cup down with deliberate care, the ceramic clinking against the saucer. The sound echoed like a gab. Sarah, I said softly, do you think I'm still the same man you married? Her smile wavered. Jason, please, I'm trying here. No, I whispered, leaning forward. You're trying to manipulate me, again. But those days are over. For a moment she froze, her mask slipping. The cafe noise carried around us, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of plates, the murmur of strangers, and in that ordinary chaos I saw her crack. Think about Daniel, she hissed finally, her voice sharp. Do you want him to see you as the reason everything fell apart? I stood, sliding my chair back slowly. No, Sarah, I want him to see me as the man who finally stopped letting you walk all over him. Her face hardened, the false warmth draining away. She knew then, her charm, her control, her games, they weren't working anymore. She thought she had pulled me back, that I'd fold under the weight of hope and nostalgia. But hope was her illusion, and I had already destroyed it. The very next day, I found out Sarah had been 2 steps ahead of me, or at least she thought she was. I was sitting at my desk at work when the email came through. Subject line, notice of custody petition. My chest tightened as I opened it. Sarah had filed for full custody of Daniel. The document was cold, clinical, but its message burned. She was officially trying to erase me. Her claim that I was unstable, financially irresponsible, and unfit to provide a safe environment. The irony almost made me laugh.
Me, the man who had kept everything afloat for years, accused of being reckless by the woman drowning in her own lies. But the twist didn't end there. Attached to the petition was an affidavit from Dan himself. He'd signed his name beneath a statement that painted me as controlling, aggressive, and dangerous. My own brother was now legally declaring me a threat. I leaned back in my chair, the fluorescent office lights buzzing overhead, the smell of toner and stale coffee filling the room. For a moment I felt the weight of it pressing down on me. They weren't just betraying me behind closed doors anymore. They were taking the war public. That night, I drove to the edge of town, to the motel where I'd arranged a quiet meeting. The low hum of neon lights buzzed outside as I entered the room. A man in a leather jacket sat on the bed, flipping through papers. He looked up, his eyes sharp. "You, Jason?" I nodded. He held up the stack of papers. Dan's debt records, gambling slips, even a police report from a bar fight last year. All of it damning, all of it traceable. "Let's just say your brother's been busy digging holes," the man said, "and I've got the shovel to bury him with." I paid in cash, the bills crisp and final. When I held that folder in my hands, I realized the unexpected twist wasn't Sarah and Dan's custody attack. It was this. They had given me the perfect opportunity to expose. Back home, I spread the documents across my kitchen table, the same table where Sarah once planned birthday parties and family dinners. Now it was a war map. Each page was a weapon. Sarah thought she could strip me of Daniel. Dan thought he could slander me into silence. But together, they had just handed me the very evidence that would unravel their world. As I looked at the folder labeled custody petition, I placed Dan's records right on top of it. The contrast was poetic. Her lies versus his sin. And in that moment, I knew exactly what my next move would be. They thought the twist was theirs, that the real twist was mine. And soon, the entire world would see who the real danger was. Before I tell you how I turned their own weapons against them, I want to pause and ask you something. What would you do if the two people you trusted most, your spouse and your own sibling, teamed up to destroy you? Not just behind your back, but in court, on paper, trying to erase your place in your child's life. Would you crumble under the weight of it all? Or would you rise, gather every piece of truth you could find, and fight until the very end? Because that's where I stand. And let me tell you, when you've already lost everything they can take from you, the only thing left is to make sure they lose too. Now here's how it all came crashing down.
The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old paper, the air heavy with tension. I sat at the table, my hands folded, my father's cufflinks fastened at my wrists. Across from me, Sarah and Dan whispered urgently to their lawyer, their expressions smug, confident. They thought this was their victory lap. The judge, a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes, entered, and the room rose in unison before settling back into their seats. Her gavel struck once, the sound cracking like thunder. Custody hearing, Flores versus Flores. She announced. Sarah's lawyer rose first, his voice smooth, rehearsed. "Your Honor, my client is seeking full custody of her son due to Mr. Jason Flores's instability, financial negligence, and unsafe behavior." He gestured toward me like I was a dangerous animal barely restrained by a leash. Sarah dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her performance flawless. "I just want what's best for Daniel," she said, her voice trembling. I remained silent. Let them play their part. My turn was coming. Then Dan was called to the stand. My own brother, he swore in, his right hand raised without a flicker of guilt. He painted me as controlling, paranoid, angry, a man unfit to raise a child. Each word cut deeper than the last. I didn't flinch. When my lawyer rose for cross-examination, he carried the folder I had prepared. He approached Dan slowly, like a surgeon about to make the first incision. "Mr. Flores," he began, "is it true that you are financially stable and capable of being a role model to your nephew?" Dan puffed out his chest. "Of course." My lawyer laid the first page on the evidence stand, a gambling slip with Dan's name, dated just 3 months prior. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "Can you explain this?" Dan stammered, his face reddening. That's not mine." Before he could finish, the second page appeared, a police report, detailing a bar fight and an outstanding fine in his name. The judge leaned forward, her expression darkening. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, her tissue now clutched tight in her fist. My lawyer didn't stop. He stacked overdue notices, loan records, and statements from debt collectors one after another until the pile towered on the stand. Would you still say you are financially stable, Mr. Flores? My lawyer asked calmly. Dan's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The judge turned her gaze toward Sarah. And this is the man you've chosen to support your household with? Sarah's face paled. For the first time, her mask cracked. I sat back, my heart steady, the storm inside me finally finding release. This wasn't rage. It was justice. Daniel sat quietly behind me with a court guardian, his eyes wide, watching it all unfold. I wanted him to see this, to understand. His father wasn't weak. His father didn't walk away, and this was only the beginning. The judge raised her hand, signaling silence. As the murmurs grew louder, "We will recess for 15 minutes, she declared. The gavel struck, but its echo sounded more like a warning shot than a pause. Because when we returned, the collapse of their empire would continue, this time in front of everyone who mattered. When the recess ended, the courtroom felt different. The smugness had drained from Sarah's face, replaced by a tightness around her eyes. Dan avoided looking at me entirely. His shoulders slumped like a man waiting for the final blow. The judge called us back to order, her sharp gaze sweeping the room. "Mr. Flores, do you wish to present any further evidence?" she asked. My lawyer, "Yes, Your Honor," he replied smoothly, lifting the last document from the fold. He held it up for everyone to see, a bank statement showing Sarah's recent luxury purchases, charged to accounts, still tied to my name. Designer handbags, spa retreats, weekend getaways, thousands of dollars wasted while she claimed I was financially irresponsible. Gasps rippled through the room. "Your Honor," my lawyer continued, "this demonstrates not only mismanagement, but deliberate manipulation of Mr. Flores's finances. He has been supporting both his wife's lifestyle and his brother's debts, all while being portrayed as unstable." The judge's jaw tightened. "Miss Flores, how do you explain this?" Sarah's mask slipped entirely. Her voice, once calm and rehearsed, cracked. That was for the family. For Daniel." I turned slightly, meeting my son's eyes. His small hand gripped the guardian's sleeve, his face pale. He knew, even at 12, he understood. None of it had ever been for him. The judge set her pen down. The room was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the back wall, every second dragging like a hammer. Finally, she spoke. "Mrs. Flores, Miss Daniel Flores," she said firmly, "your credibility has been severely compromised. This court cannot ignore the pattern of financial irresponsibility, deceit, and reckless behavior you have both demonstrated." Sarah's lawyer tried to interject, but the judge silenced him with a raised hand. "Custody will remain joint," she declared, "with primary residence assigned to Mr. Jason Flores, until further review. Mrs. Flores will retain visitation rights, but the court expects a revised financial disclosure within 30 days. Additionally, Ms. Daniel Flores, you will be reported to the appropriate authorities regarding your outstanding debts and prior conduct." The gavel came down, sharp and final. For a moment, I couldn't move. The words hung in the air like the first breath after drowning. Sarah's mouth opened in protest, but no sound came out. Dan buried his face in his hands, the weight of exposure crushing him. I stood slowly, straightening my jacket, the cufflinks on my wrists gleaming under the courtroom lights. Daniel ran to me, throwing his arms around my waist. His voice was muffled against my chest. "I knew you wouldn't give up, Dad." I held him close, my throat tight. Across the aisle, Sarah stared at us with eyes that once held love but now burned with rage and fear. Because she finally understood. She thought she could replace me, but now she was the one left alone. The courthouse steps felt colder than the courtroom itself. Reporters weren't there. It wasn't that kind of case, but to me it might as well have been the world's stage. Every step down those stairs felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I thought I had lost forever. Daniel clung to my hand, his grip firm, steady, as though he understood this wasn't just about custody. It was about survival, about truth. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the stone. For the first time in months, the light didn't feel cruel. Behind us, I heard Sarah's heels clacking sharply, each step frantic, desperate. "Jason," she called out. Her voice no longer carried authority. It was ragged, broken. "You can't do this. You can't just take him away from me. I turned, Daniel still holding my hand. She looked smaller than I remembered, her makeup smudged, her posture bent under the weight of consequences she never thought she'd face. Dan hovered behind her, his phone pressed to his ear, speaking urgently, probably trying to buy time with men who no longer wanted promises, just payment. For a moment, I saw the woman I had once loved, the one who brought me lemonade in the summer heat, who smiled when we painted Daniel's room together, who whispered that she couldn't imagine life without me. But that woman was gone. What stood in front of me now was someone hollowed out by greed and betrayal. You did this to yourself, Sarah, I said, my voice calm even. You wanted everything. Now you have nothing. Her eyes glistened with tears, but not of regret, of anger. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, just silence. I turned back toward the parking lot, where my truck waited. Daniel climbed in beside me, quiet at first. Then, as I started the engine, he whispered, Dad, does this mean we're free? I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing against my chest. Yes, son, I said softly. We're free. The drive home was quiet, but not uncomfortable. The air smelled of fresh rain, and the streets glistened under the afternoon sun. Daniel leaned his head against the window, his eyes heavy with the kind of exhaustion only a child shouldn't know. When we pulled into the driveway of my house, our house, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was a fortress, a place rebuilt not with wood and nails, but with truth and resilience. That night, I tucked Daniel into bed. He asked me to leave the light on, and for the first time in weeks, he slept peacefully. I stood in the doorway, watching his steady breathing, and felt a warmth spread through me. Downstairs, I opened the small wooden box that held my father's cufflinks. I turned them over in my hand, their surface cool and familiar. For the first time, I understood what he meant when he told me that strength isn't in how hard you hit, it's in how long you can stand. I had stood, through betrayal, through humiliation, through war, and I was still standing. Sarah thought she could replace me, but now, she was the one left in the shadows, stripped of the power she had stolen, abandoned by the very man she betrayed me with. And me, I wasn't broken anymore. I was whole. Weeks passed, but the echoes of the courtroom still lingered in my mind. The smell of polished wood, the gavel's crack, Sarah's face when the judge ruled against her. Those images, replayed like a film I would never forget. Yet life was changing, reshaping itself into something new, something stronger. Daniel and I settled into a rhythm. Mornings began with the smell of coffee and toast, the kitchen filled with the quiet hum of normal life. I drove him to school, his backpack bouncing against the seat, his laughter returning little by little. In the evenings, we cooked dinner together, sometimes messy, sometimes burnt, but always ours. The house felt alive again, not haunted by betrayal, but warmed by the sound of healing. The scent of fresh paint lingered after I finally repainted the living room, covering the walls where Sarah's perfume once clung. Even the creak of the stairs felt comforting now, like the house itself was relieved to breathe again. But transformation didn't come without struggle. Some nights, when Daniel was asleep, I sat alone in the dark living room, staring at the old photo albums. There she was, Sarah, smiling, laughing, holding Daniel as a baby. And I asked myself the same question, was any of it ever real? At first the thought tore me apart, but over time, I realized the answer didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the man I had become through the fire. I no longer felt the urge to chase her shadow, to demand answers from a woman who no longer held power over me. The Jason, who once sacrificed everything for her approval, was gone. The Jason, who stood now, was sharper, colder when needed, but also clearer, steadier, more present for his son. Even Dan's downfall unfolded without my hand anymore. Word spread quickly about his debts, his reckless choice. The same men I'd whispered to weeks earlier made sure his reputation collapsed. Last I heard, he'd skipped town, leaving behind more enemies than friends. Sarah was left alone, scrambling to pay bills without his support. I didn't celebrate their ruin, not outwardly. Revenge wasn't about dancing on their graves. It was about reclaiming what they tried to steal from me, my dignity, my fatherhood, my peace. And I had all three back. One Saturday morning,
Daniel and I went fishing at the lake my father once took me to. The water shimmered under the sun, dragonflies darting across the surface. Daniel sat beside me, his line cast, his eyes fixed on the ripples. "Dad," he said softly, "are you happy now?" I looked at him, at the boy who had endured so much in silence, and I smiled. "Yes, I'm happy because we're together. That's all I need." He nodded, satisfied, and leaned against me. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, the sound of water lapping gently against the shore. For the first time in a long time, I felt whole, not because I had destroyed them, but because I had rebuilt us. When we packed up and walked back to the truck, I slipped my father's cufflinks into my pocket, carrying them not as a symbol of war anymore, but of legacy. They reminded me that strength endures, that even when the world tries to break you, you can rise, scarred but unshaken. Sarah thought she could replace me, but I had transformed into a man who could never be. And as the sun set over the lake, painting the sky in gold and crimson, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Our story, Daniel's and mine, wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about survival, renewal, and the kind of love that no one could ever steal. Looking back, I realized the betrayal didn't destroy me. It revealed me. It showed me who I really was when the world tried to tear me apart. I learned that love built on lies collapses, but love built on truth, like the bond between a father and son, endures. Sarah thought she could replace me, thought I'd fade quietly into the background, but now, she's the one left with silence, while I stand stronger than ever. If you've ever faced betrayal, remember this: your worth is not defined by those who betray you, but by how you rise after they fall. And now, I want to hear from you. Would you have taken the same path of patience and strategy, or walked away? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one.